habit and survive the changes that this breakage will cause in his life pattern. This is something that, again, is becoming a very definite issue. Another one, of course, a very, very definite one, is the spread of various narcotic addictions among young people. Most young people today are aware of the tragedies of various hard drugs, but they are not able to escape the pressure of the peer group, and they're not able to break the habit once it has moved in upon them. They do not have the experience in life, they do not have the personal strength, and in most cases they do not have the family strength to assist them to make this correction. So the problem remains one which they will have to begin, at least, to work out within themselves through a private, quiet dedication of conduct to what is known inwardly to be true. This knowing inwardly that there is something better than what they are doing is a voice of conscience. It is something that tells them that it is not necessary for them to be weak. But in order not to be weak, they must become strong. They must take hold of their personal lives. If they do not take hold of these lives, they will gradually fall into the common failings, ailments, and tragedies of their times. Now, in many character problems, we have the same situation. Wherever the individual can honestly say to himself that he is not doing what is best for him, conscience is telling him something. Conscience is warning him. Conscience is trying to inspire him to make the necessary temperamental and personality changes. The most dangerous and important of these reformational processes is to gain some form of control over attitudes. Attitudes simply are very difficult for the individual to find solutions for. We have all kinds of attitudes that are simply not good. Nature, and involving soul power and conscience, very often helps gradually to get over attitudes that otherwise would be crippling. The individual who is under sudden grief, for example, may for a time be badly disoriented, but in the course of some months or a year or two, nature begins to heal this. And unless the person centers and intensifies the neurosis, he will gradually recover. There are other attitudes, however, which become more fixed with years, and these are attitudes of temperament or disposition which have been nursed perhaps since childhood. Therefore, the beginning of the release of the soul is through obedience to conscience. And if this conscience, when it does come through, does not invite in the right direction, then what we are suffering from is not a wrong conscience, but an inability to break through a personality pattern. Very often what we call conscience is nothing but attitude. And if the conscience impels us to do that which is not beautiful, not good, not essentially progressive for ourselves, then it is not conscience at all. There is no such a thing really as a bad conscience. It is a conscience burdened with the sins of the flesh. This means that we cannot always depend upon the inside. We do not know where inside pressures come from. Some of them may be of God, but some of them are merely pressures of our own ego, our own personal attitudes, trying to force themselves into a dominant position. Attitudes trying to become dictators of careers. And where this sets in, we also have to have the wisdom to note the false doctrine that is being forced upon us by our own selfishness and self-interest. Wherever we find lives that are not interesting, not useful, not constructive, not busily engaged in some worthy purpose, we find lives that have more or less fallen victim to self-centeredness. The individual who has no way, as far as he can imagine, of doing good is simply one who has measured good in the terms of his own attitudes alone, and not in terms of the things that need doing. The older group, or the more aged people, have some more of this problem to consider. When they retire from some active occupation, which has acted as a general guide and rule, they fall back upon themselves. And sometimes when they fall back upon or into themselves, they fall into a vacuum. They fall into a condition in which there is no longer any particular incentives to do anything. These people, maybe with 10 or 15 years of good life ahead of them, simply descend into an inertia. They do nothing but waste time. They try to find something to do to fill the days that they are going to be here under Social Security. They are trying to get out of this world slowly but painlessly. And of course the problem is such that they usually fail in both cases. The individual who has time must recognize that life is a commitment to usefulness. Every individual who is not bound by some labor over which he has no control must place himself under the control of a constructive purpose. If he does not do this, he will not grow. If he does not grow, he will face the future with a poor hope. He will also carry away from this world less of good than he should. This life should be an experience which we take with us, in which we are glad, in substance, that we have been given the opportunity to grow. But there is nothing more tragic than to be given an opportunity and waste it. So older persons on retirement patterns should find things to do that mean something. They can always, in these days of great stress and trial, find useful outlets of some kind. They can assist those who are more unhappy than themselves. They can share whatever they have of insight and understanding with those in need. They can help disillusioned persons to realize that there are good people around them, even though they have not previously known many of them. Everywhere, growth is the answer to the problem. And growth means two things: that we shall change for the better inside, and having changed, shall use the new insights to control outer conduct, so that it becomes more beneficial both to ourselves and to others. Failure to do this is a waste of life, and nature penalizes a waste of this kind. Actually, then, you can begin to nourish the soul, as many people could do, by turning in older years to various arts by means of which beauty and the insights to recognize universal law and order become better disciplines. The love of the beautiful, through music, through painting, through folk arts and crafts, through all kinds of studies of natural things, to find their beneficial value to others, and having attained some such knowledge, sharing it with those whom we know need it. This type of career helps to feed the soul, for the soul rejoices in its own quality, and its own qualities are particularly charity and compassion. We can do the same thing with our attitudes. We can reach the point, perhaps, that Will Rogers said he reached, but he never met a man to whom he couldn't be a friend. And this kind of concept can be carried into personal living. We can gradually penetrate the differences that separate us and find in every living thing the same spiritual soul germ that we have within ourselves. We can gradually regain our own equilibrium in a world of unbalanced factors. We can develop a new understanding of religion. We can find how to meet and work with people of other faiths pleasantly, comfortably, happily, joyfully. We can begin to understand the great systems of thought that have helped to advance the world. And wherever we learn a new idea, we must apply it to our own conduct. If we have a mental extension, it should result in a material improvement in our orientation. And wherever we have leisure, wherever we have opportunity, we should carefully guard and censor our conduct under these new insights that have come to us. This is also a very valuable factor in improving the general condition of the world around us. If we do not support corruption, we will not have so much of it. If we find our television screen is not giving us what we want, we can turn it off. And in so doing, if enough persons do this, the changes will occur that we want. We can do the same thing with every expenditure. We can stop being wasteful. We can be more wise. We can control our own appetites. We can keep out of debt. We can make various adjustments in which our own personal improvement becomes a unit in social improvement. And as more and more persons awake to these realizations, the world itself improves. And as the world gets better, the voice of conscience in each of us will get stronger and be more available for the improvement of our environment. We can stop wasting. We can stop deceiving. We can keep the speed limit. We can do all kinds of things which do not really interfere with our social life in any major manner, but which will indicate that by degrees we are overcoming that instinct to chisel that is inside of so many of us. We will begin to think in terms of honesty, of weights and measures. And all these things will rest as a crown of peace upon the conscience. For the conscience wants these things. The conscience is there to give us advice in time of trouble. In the old doctrines and philosophies, conscience was an elder, a kindly old counselor, a sort of paternal grandfather, the voice of long ages of experience, given out and turned and transformed into the simple needs of coming generations. As children once gathered around their grandparents to hear the stories of old times, so the conscience within us is an eternal teacher. It is something that is constantly giving us the benefit of all of the living of time, all of the past and all of the days that have gone by, and also inspiring us to live better today and to build a better future for us all. If we listen to this, if we really allow it to speak, it will give us not only a clearer insight of what to do next, but will help to give us the strength to do what is next. This is another very serious problem, namely that the average individual wants to grow but does not know how. He does not know what steps he should take. He does not know how he should begin to improve himself. Education should have taught him this long ago, but it didn't do it. Religion should have taught it to him. It did in a way, but it never gave him the vital impulse to accomplish now those things which are most immediately necessary. Because of this, and because of the fact that environment is doing very little for us and much to us, we are in doubt as to how to start to grow. If we want to listen to conscience, if we want to follow it, how do we proceed? If conscience is really a step ahead of us, which is usually the case, how do we take that step? I think the answer to that becomes more or less obvious in the way in which conscience operates in the individual. Conscience usually steps in at a moment when the individual is under temptation to be less than himself. Conscience comes in as a result of repentance over an action which we know we should not have committed. A conscience may point out that we have said an unkind word when a kind one would have been more useful. Conscience tells us that we shouldn't have tried to get more than we were entitled to in some transaction. Conscience may tell us that when the wholesale price goes up 5 cents, we are not entitled to raise the price of the article by $5. These things we know. And if we're quiet for a moment, we realize this. But as a conscience bomb, we take another drink and keep on. Actually, when this voice of conscience begins to speak, all we really have to do is listen. And when it says to us, you shouldn't have done that, then we should try definitely to understand why we shouldn't have done it, and if possible to undo the thing that we did that was wrong.